All right. There are two things, I don't know that I said them in the little, I won't say little, in the Quintilian assignment. There are two things, well there's two things that I don't know that came out in the assignment that I think you should know. Or you should at least have written down in your notes. One, not that, it's not that this never happened, but Quintilian is kind of the first that we see specifically writing down and saying, or at least we notice it clearly with him, that children learn differently at different ages, and so we should teach using different methods that, with the methods that are stronger with the development of the child. So he's recognizing child development. What a guy in 1980 called developmental theory. It's been around for a long time. It wasn't just, it's not a recent thing. Okay? So when I say that, what am I referring to? What can you give an example or maybe an explanation of what I mean by children learn different ways at different times, and so we should teach along with those ideas? Are those just words that we wrote down on the paper so that if we see a question we can write those words down again? Okay? So I understand that, the necessity of that, but I would rather just go beyond that. So what do we mean when we say that? Can you think of ways that you learn differently now than you did when you were younger, or even younger? Or things that, thinking processes that you can do now that you couldn't do when you were younger. I've given a few more eyes and hands that look like they're understanding what I'm saying, and some still not. Serenity.
Like when you're younger, you'll need more like interaction, and you'll want more visual and like involve more like
Okay.
hands clapping when they're counting or something like that.
Sure,
To kind of help them.
sure. We don't, it would be fun for about 10 minutes or way less if I treated you and prepared lessons like you were a bunch of second graders. I mean, it would be novel. Okay, if I had you standing up and sitting down and clapping and chanting, you know, but you're done with that, right? Okay, but if I taught this way, the way I do in here, when I was at Bible Club, it wouldn't work. Okay, I'm not, you know, super animated and crazy at Bible Club, but it's not the same. Okay, there's different things going on. Why? Because as we grow, we think differently. And the one thing that Serenity pointed out is kind of the physical involvement, the clapping. What else did you say?
Like more visual and
Visual,
interaction.
yes. Visual and kinetic. Physical. Are there other things that you can think of? Maybe even mentally, but maybe not? Okay, I said mentally, and some new hands went up. Bethany.
There's that higher vocabulary when the teacher's teaching, you can understand more specific definitions and stuff.
Okay, yeah, because just as a matter of having lived longer, we know more words, and we can maybe be a little more precise when we talk. Sure. Rebecca?
When children are little, they memorize lists better, but then when you get older, you progress and you can expound on maybe the list more, and you can memorize things more in depth.
Okay, all right, so, I would give an example of that being maybe 3rd, 4th grade, they can tell you a list of all the capitals of the states in the United States. But they might not know exactly where all those capitals are, or the significance of one over another, if there is some significance. So memory, our memories when we're younger are quite strong, but our understanding is not so strong. Okay, we can know certain things, but not understand what we know. So, and then really there is a time when we start trying to make connections between what we know. Have you ever worked with a kid or been talking to someone and they made the wrong connection? You know, they might even, you know, that's not true because of this. And they made a connection, but it was the wrong connection because they were young and really didn't know. Okay, so kids at that age, there's a certain age where they start making connections. Before that time, they just know lots of stuff and they just like to spout stuff off. But then they start reasoning. They start trying to understand, and they make wrong connections. And of course, that's what school at that point should start capitalizing on that. Not just keeping on giving them tons of information, but tell them how to use that information. So that's that general idea of we learn differently. We have we have our minds and our physical abilities and even our learning abilities go through stages where one is stronger than another. Okay, I don't think anybody that believes this thinks that it's not, that another style of learning is non-existent, unless we're talking about babies or something like that. But once you get to learning age, you know, it's not that something's non-existent, it's just that it's stronger. That trait is stronger. And then as we grow, because even now, most people would say that now we hopefully understand, and even some like it more than others, but we have the ability to even take what we know and present it. And each one of us would present it in different ways, but we can be creative in our presentation of the things that we understand. Okay, so, but even though we're all the way so advanced that we can do that, we can still memorize, right? And little kids that memorize stuff can get up and present stuff, even though their strength is not presentation. That would be an older person's strength. So, Quintilian, we can see clearly in several of his writings the idea that basically developmental theory, that children develop, and as they develop they have different strengths and we should teach with those strengths. Another thing that you should note him for, and this would just be kind of a title, and it wasn't in the things that I found for you to read, but most educators would say that he was the first teacher of teachers. I don't know that he had a teacher's college, but his writings were not just for students. His writings were for people who wanted to be teachers. Okay? They're specifically framed in a way that teachers would learn from them. Okay? So, Quintilian says, teach with the grain, teach with the strengths of the child, and he's the teacher of teachers. But even just that idea that you would teach with, that he says we should teach with the grain, with the strength of the child, that is something that would be told to teachers or parents. But even in these ancient times, parents taught, but many times they hired a teacher or they owned a teacher, something like that. So he's the first teacher of teachers. I would say this too. In our discussion in the computer or online or whatever, I was very pleased. I was generally very pleased, and there was nobody, I don't think, that I was like, that was stupid, or I wish they had done more, or something like that. But I would point out that when you're answering questions from me, you gotta read the whole question and not skim it. Okay? Because there was a certain, I asked, as an ancient, what would it mean to be a good man that speaks well. Okay? Now, I wasn't real clear. I didn't say as an ancient who's not Moses or whatever. But generally, when we're thinking about the ancients, we're thinking about pagans. We're thinking about Greeks, Romans, and all that. And so really, the way you answered these questions were not bad. But they were okay. But some caught that little part, and and some of you didn't catch it, probably, but you just didn't mention, being a righteous man or, whatever. So, if you mentioned truth, they knew what truth was. Socrates was about truth and beauty, okay? So, it's just, an ancient wouldn't, use the Bible as a reason for why he should say the truth. It would be more of a natural idea. And there's a weakness there, of course. But even though they didn't have the Bible, they did have, and I would encourage you, if you haven't looked at it in a while, go through and at least look for the times when I responded, okay? And then look at what I responded to. I was not, if you think I was being critical, I was not trying to be critical, okay? But I was trying to respond. And there were certain points that were brought out that I thought was helpful. And so look at where I responded and look at what I responded to, and that should help your thinking and understanding of the ideas there. So, all right. So that's Quintilian. So that's Quintilian. So that's Quintilian. So that's Quintilian. So that's Quintilian.